How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion coming our way. The discussion today is basically preparing yourself for the supervisor interview. Now, guys, all we can do is kind of give you generalities because we really don't know what they're going to ask, but we can provide you with some information that I feel that will help you be more confident on the interview. I think that's the key here. How do we present more confidently, or how do we confidently present ourselves? Something like that. But you guys get the picture. How do we confidently present ourselves? There you go. Whatever. It works. We get the point. Hey, but real quick before I introduce Russ, even though we know who Russ is, let me just go over my sponsors. Guys, we have American Military University. Guys, if you get a chance and you're looking to seek higher education, getting that degree, please check out American Military University. It's a great school. It's a phenomenal school, and they've been supportive of me since day one, supportive of the field of corrections since even before we met. So, again, American Military University. We also have Guardian RFID. Today's video is brought to you by Guardian RFID. From inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit GuardianRFID.com for more information. And we also have the WRAP, W-R-A-P. The WRAP. Controlling combative subjects quickly and in an upright position so they can breathe has never been more important. Departments such as Washington, D.O.C., L.A. County, San Diego County, and hundreds of other facilities across the U.S. trust and believe in the WRAP restraint. Go to SafeRestraints.com for contact information and mention Tier Talk to receive instructor training at no cost. Lower liability for your facility and your personnel with the WRAP. Give the WRAP a call today, 800-WRAP. 911. Guys, if you guys get a chance, also my book is on the market, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. The book is on Amazon. I have a link in the description for that. And guys, I forgot to tell you, I also have a link for the WRAP video as well. If you don't know what the WRAP is, in the description is going to be a link. I also would like to dedicate this episode to Sergeant Richard Sterling. Sergeant Richard Sterling's end of watch was 12/14/2021. He's a hero. He was a sergeant, worked at Miami Correctional Facility out in Indiana. He was a range instructor. He was well loved by his people. This is a serious loss for them. It was unexpected. I just want to dedicate this whole episode to this fallen hero. He is someone that led by example. He is a true professional. And I just want our family out there in Indiana to know that we're thinking of them during this time, and that you have our support. And again, Sergeant Richard Sterling, thank you for your service. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your professionalism. Again, just another hero taken from us way too soon. Would you agree, Russ?
Oh, absolutely. It's always hard to hear about those things because we so much identify. He was one of us, and we are him.
Yes, and guys, I like what Russ said. At any moment, that could be one of us. So, again, Sergeant Richard Sterling, just thank you for being the best of us. Just heard really good things about this fallen hero, and it's a hit for the whole profession. And again, our love and support to the state of Indiana. Hey, Russ, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Not at all, Anthony. My name is Russ Hamilton. I've got about 30 years or so in the profession. I'm retired now from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Started way back at San Quentin back in about 1989. And I also have some experience working in juvenile detention facilities. And now I work for a private contractor, and we do reentry and rehabilitation with parolees and probationers.
Hey, Russ, Housekeepers of Chaos going on Facebook.
Oh, man, every day I'm loving what's going on there. I think we're providing, real knowledge, content, and training for people that are in the profession, whether they're on the custodial side or the free person side. And so every day we're adding more people. We're getting ready here pretty quick to break the 5,000 member barrier. And I just love being able to help people that, want some guidance.
Right now, this is an interesting topic, preparing for the supervisor interview, because I still believe that even if you do take a test to be a supervisor, so like maybe some civil service test, multiple choice, whatever it is, I mean, that could give you a number that gives you the first opportunity, but that may not mean that you're the best candidate. All because you score high on the test, I still believe there should be some in-person interviews and some discretion, as long as the discretion is used for the right reasons. I believe that the test itself, if there is a civil service test, that's great. That shows some potential, but there should be some discretion from maybe a panel or something, because again, there are certain things that you're not going to be able to see on a test. You're going to have to be able to see when you interview with that person one-on-one. So this is more of those who are going to be sitting through those panels, being interviewed, getting ready to move up. And I'm very familiar with that process, because that's the process I went through after I took a test. I did have a in-person interview. And even recently, as I moved up in the profession, I just recently got promoted myself. I wasn't promoted from a test. I was promoted from a series of interviews. So I think the interviews to me are a very strong component in picking the right person. But again, only if it's used correctly, because sometimes people like to use the interview process to pick their own people. That's not what I'm saying. This, I think, if used correctly, is the best way to pick somebody for the job, because it gives you a little bit more information. But Russ, what was the process for you when you made rank to sergeant?
So we started out with written test, and you just ended up getting put in to a pool depending on how high you scored on the test. In the particular one I made second rank, and so that put me, I don't know, pretty high up. We had like 5,000 or 6,000 people took the test, and so I was good enough or lucky enough or whatever to get into that upper spot where I was, sure to actually get the promotion out of it. After that, though, then it's the oral interview where you go in and you have to, talk about yourself, talk about what you know, talk about what you've done, talk about what your vision is, and, get clearance from the people that actually want to give you the position at whichever particular prison that you're interviewing at.
Hey, out of curiosity, Russ, because I went through the same process. It was a test. I scored like 140, I believe, when I made sergeant. And again, mind you, I work for the state, so 140 was a medium average number, but give you an opportunity. Definitely, usually I think for sergeants, maybe the top 200 usually get selected depending on the time. And then like maybe lieutenants, top 100, majors, a lot less than that. But after I took the first test, it was an interview. Now, again, when you interviewed, you would have to, the facility could still take within the top 3 of who's being interviewed, but there's only so many times they can turn somebody down. You would have to be able to start to justify why this one person who's number 10 is being interviewed with people that are in the 80s and 90s. It's just, you have to eventually be able to justify it. But I do feel there was some discretion to some extent when you're brought in front and they're asking you questions. Now, the funny thing is that for the people that are sitting on this panel, this is a great opportunity for you to kind of get a taste of who's coming into this facility. So you want to really make sure that you have the right questions. Now, with that said, the questions that you ask for in order to be fair, I guess, you have to kind of, I'm not a big fan of this part, but I get, in order to keep fair, you gotta ask people the same questions to try to keep things fair. But the problem is, I feel that when you really start to talk to somebody, you start to interview them, there may be other things you may want to know about them that may not be one of the standard questions. So that's fine. Here's what you could do at that point. Is once you ask the questions that you may have to go through and you've closed off on that part of the interview, you could always go back and maybe, get a better feel for them. Maybe ask other questions or have them elaborate on something. But you do have to keep some of that procedure very consistent, because again, it's, if you ask a question that's easy for one party and a different question that's a lot harder for the next person coming, and they find out that the questions were not consistent, and however they scored that, it's going to be unfair because the questions themselves weren't consistent. So it doesn't provide you with a consistent score. Now, that's kind of part of the civil service side of things. Granted, I still feel I still feel the better way is kind of like that old school style where, you sit in, let's get to know each other, see what you're about, see what your motivations are, and really develop questions that are based on what's being presented to you from the person being interviewed. So I may have a few questions, but when I'm asking you questions, that may lead us to some other areas that I may want to explore and see what you're about. And I believe there should be some discretion. I believe that should be allowed, but people are going to want to keep things consistent because they're always afraid of the lawsuit or the liability. But you follow what I'm saying, Russ? Like some people do have consistent set of questions, but I still don't feel that as a real true interview. I do believe there has to be some empowering to the people doing the interview, allowing them to kind of develop some rapport as they're doing the interview to get some really good questions that relate to that person and what specifically they feel that person can provide, because each person that interviews may have a different type of potential that can't be identified through the consistent questions or generalized questions that you're asking everyone. That's why it's good to understand who that person is and build questions to understand where that person's potential may go, right?
Yeah, it's that standardization that, can tend to box you into the little corner if all you're doing is just answering that question. That's why when you go in there, you should be thinking ahead of time about how you can showcase yourself within the confines of that question. As a supervisor, there's a series of different things that they're going to ask you that is probably, outside your realm of experience, unless you've pursued those things, things like use of force, things like inmate discipline, employee discipline, running a crime scene and evidence preservation. And these are your chances to bring up those things that you've done, to tell them and to show them that you know what's going on, you know the policy, you know the procedure, and you've already done these things. If you don't have that as your background, then yeah, you're just going to answer those the least standard baseline area, and you're not going to be able to really, wow or impress them. You're muted.
Ah, damn it. I love what you said. Yeah, you got that off. But you know what? I'm not even going to edit that out because you deserve it. You're so happy. I love what you said, though. Preparing yourself still to be within those confines, because you know what? You can make any question your own, but if they're going to sit there and they're going to ask you generalized questions, then you have to find a way to kind of make yourself unique within that generality, the generalized questions. So it means you don't want to give those same answers as, well, why should we pick you over everyone else? Oh, because I'm devoted and I'm, persistent. And no, because at the end, everybody's going to say that. And what you got to do is tell them why through behaviors that, I like what Russ said. What makes you different? Well, I'm going to go through my evaluated experience. I'm going to say, well, let's see, I've spent time doing this, and this. I spent time, I've led search teams. I've done this, I've done that. And, because you're showing people, not only do you have the experience, but you can also give them a chance of evaluated experience. Let them know what you've learned as being that maybe team leader, as a frontline member, maybe in that go-to person, the searches thing, what you've learned, what value have you taken? Because now, mind you, when you're being interviewed for a supervisory position, you really have to, in my mind, have value for what you're doing, because if you don't have value for what you're doing, when you move up, you're not going to be able to give any value back down to the people that you now supervise. So I just want to go, again, Russ said was spot on. If they still follow those generalized questions, then you have to remember something. The cookie cutter answers are not going to work. It's not going to make you stand out. You have to literally understand, okay, I'm going in for this interview. What is it that I bring to the table that you don't even have to say that makes you different than everybody else, because you don't know what else is done. But for you, what you feel are your strengths going in. Okay, so when I go in, why would someone pick me to be a supervisor? Because and Russ, you know this, guys, picking a supervisor at any level is probably the most important decision that panel has to make, because that supervisor is given a level of trust. So when you answer that question of why should they pick me as a supervisor, it's basically is, why should they trust me in this position to oversee other people? Russ, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they're gonna want that person that's gonna take those people to the next level as well. One of the biggest parts about being a supervisor is that training aspect. You have to be able to have something to offer to train these people. If you don't have a huge broad background yourself, what is it that you're going to bring to the table? How are you going to train people that know more than you? And so at that point, your experience has been shortcut, and you're not going to be nearly as competitive, probably, depending on what the pool looks like, as those other things. That's why it's always in your best interest to start now and start taking the initiative to get the kinds of experiential, experience that's going to put you ahead of that pack.
Right. And I'm actually, so this show was requested. So I'm telling the gentleman to hit me up. I'm saying doing the show now. So you basically, I like what Russ said there too, is you have to be able to showcase that you're ahead of the pack, which means that to me, it's kind of showing what you're going to be able to bring to the table, but you also have to understand what's needed. I mean, not only do you have to kind of understand what you can provide, but you also got to kind of know what it is that's needed. Because if you're sitting there and you don't know what's needed, then you're not going to know what your best attributes are that would be a benefit to what the agency needs. Like right now, I can tell you something right now. If I'm being interviewed, I'm going to find some way to express how we need supervisors right now that really care for the profession during these tough times, that can find a way to motivate somebody, to hopefully inspire them to want to kind of do this work, find value in this work. Because right now, guys, we're losing a lot of people right now because they're losing value for the work, because they're overwhelmed and they're stressed out. And right now, we really need supervisors right now who can step up and motivate, because in the end, guys, the outcome of what's happening, the understaffing, stuff like that, I mean, we have very little control of, what's happening out there. But a good supervisor can maybe control the morale a little bit, So basically, it's how we react to these bad times. I don't want a supervisor who's already disgruntled. I want a supervisor that knows how to motivate and keep people, understand the value behind what we do. So again, I think for me, if I was being put on this interview, I would definitely express the value that I have in this profession and the importance of making sure that I remind people every day of their importance in this profession. But Russ, you think being a supervisor right now is probably harder than ever because of the times?
Well, yeah, the times is really where we're at, between COVID and between this, new permissive society that we're in, where, everyone, or actually almost no one, now ends up in prison or in jail, and there's no accountability for anyone, the inmates, the staff, everything. I think that it does allow you to shine better if that's part of your personality, where you do hold people accountable, where you hold yourself accountable, and where you make sure that you know what the bounds of your profession are, so that you can execute these things that you're going to need as a supervisor. That's one way you can set yourself apart.
Right. And guys, by the way, if you notice what me and Russ keep on saying is that you're setting yourself apart. But I want to make sure we also realize something. Sometimes I'll ask you, like, why should we pick you over others? I don't know. Well, I don't know what the others are about. So I'm not going to compare myself. What I'm going to tell you is what I know I bring to the table. And guys, what you bring to the table has to be tangible. A lot of times people will sit there and mention these qualities, that are very, as I mentioned, very generic qualities. And okay, anybody has those qualities. I like to do this. Instead of me saying these labels, what I'll do is I'll say behavior or actions I'm committed to, showing them that example, and let them figure out what label that deserves. So I don't need to say I'm dedicated. I'll explain to you why I'm dedicated and let them figure out the word dedication. Because the labels get used so many times because they're generic, that you trust and believe when they're going through these interviews and they're asking these questions that require those labels and people answer it with those. It's like, oh, I heard this before. What's different about you? 10 people that came in today, all 10 said they're trustworthy, they're professional. It's like, guys, I remember when I went on the interview, one of the things is like, why should we pick you? So right off the bat, I started doing that. I said, because I'm persistent and I'll do whatever I can. I said all these things, but then I was like, you know what? Wait a second. I went back to school, got a degree, did all these things because I wanted this position. So it wasn't the word me saying persistence that carried weight. It was the actions that led them to define me as being persistent. So I think for me, the best key when you're asked about questions that best, how do you promote yourself? Like Russ said, in a unique way, look for behaviors, look for moments where you had impact. And also, I like what Russ said before too. When they ask you questions, you could bring it into your own. Like, so like, if they want to ask, why should we pick you? Let's just say, maybe you could talk about an experience of, well, you know what? I'll give you an example. Recently, I was assigned to this post and this is what was going on. And this is what I did to make a positive impact on both the population and my peers. And, and really be specific, because those specific experiences, first off, your story connects to that panel. Stories always connect, guys. People want to hear stories. But second thing is, your story is unique because it's your story. Russ, have you ever used real stories to kind of express what makes you different?
Yeah, real world examples are, invaluable in getting who you are across to them. But they're also great in that, there's going to be usually a set of about 5, 6, maybe even 7 or 8 different scenarios that they're going to give you. They'll ask you, a series of these scenario things. And usually they go something like this. You'll have a PREA one. You'll have a use of force one. You'll have an inmate discipline one. You'll have an employee discipline one. And then, probably something about incident command and something about evidence, maybe a medical response scenario in there. And what you can do is you can use these scenarios that they start out by giving you to branch off into other things. For instance, they're going to ask you about PREA. Well, anyone can get up there and spit out about, what PREA stands for and give a few little blurbs. But when you start talking about in your experience where you handled a PREA case, or maybe you didn't have any experience in PREA, but you do know evidence and crime scene preservation, you can talk about how you would use that maybe in whatever scenario they give you, in order to carry out your duties. And the same thing goes for, inmate discipline or use of force. All those things can bleed in to other ways for you to showcase the things that you've been involved in. When they ask you that one on use of force, man, you talk about everything. You don't just talk about the use of force. You take it from the beginning all the way to the end, and you talk about getting medical clearance for the inmates before they go to ADSEG. You talk about making sure that you get your staff medically cleared and what that involves and what kind of reports you might have to get. You talk about in this incident that you had about, maintaining that crime scene preservation, whether you've got to take photos, whether you've got to draw schematics, and you use all that to showcase the things that you've been involved in. When I became a sergeant and when I went through the oral board, it was easy for me because I had been that unit officer and I had done every single one of these things. I had carried out that inmate discipline. I had carried out all those things where, I had to be involved in doing crime scene preservation, issuing paperwork on incidents, being involved with the command of an incident. And so I broadened my horizon. I broadened the things that I was involved in so that my experience, would shine through to them. So that's what you really have to do. And those questions that they ask you, because there's going to be scenarios almost surely, is your chance to talk about your experiences, but don't narrow it down just to like that PREA, that use of force or whatever. Branch out and talk about all those other things that they're going to hit at the same time.
Russ, what you're saying is spot on. I want to compliment something on that too. So a lot of people, when they go out for these interviews, they're going to look to memorize policy and spend a lot of time like really trying to memorize it. And the problem is, I get it. Anybody can memorize. I think what really helps people is when they look at the policy and they're able to apply it to something in their head. So like, as I said, if I'm a unit officer, right, and I'm reading a policy, let's say on the escape policy, let me play the sergeant's role and let me picture myself in my facility and what needs to be done. I mean, I remember helping someone study for one of these interviews, and one of the questions could have been a policy-driven question. And it was a policy-driven question that was about a world that she wasn't really involved in. She was from the rehabilitation side, and this would have been a custody question because it's a higher level interview where, you know, you're crossing into operations, but this person didn't have the custody side. This was where her weak spot was because, again, she was on the rehabilitative side. So what I did was when they asked her a question about, let's say, an escape policy, you got to realize something. This person is not going to have access to that policy. So they're not going to, you can't just give them that policy to study. It's just, you know, well, Gangi, what do I do? Well, what you do is, have you ever been through an escape alert? And she goes, yes. I said, well, then just share that story, because the key right now is just to let them see that you understand the process so you could bring it your own. You know, I don't know this escape, but I do know, I remember we had this happen, and this is what custody did. This is what we had to do. Let them show that you're familiar with this side of things, because again, you could be confident even if you don't know an answer, and we'll express that in a little bit because that's something we could explore in a few seconds. But I want people to realize something. Don't just look to memorize, apply it. So if you're reading about these policies and procedures, man, I'm telling you, if you could play it out in your head, when you go to express that story, you know, say it. You know, hey, you know what? I went through this. This is exactly what we did. I mean, one of the questions that they ask a lot on a lot of these interviews is dealing with a medical outbreak. And a lot of people are remembering, well, let me remember. So what happens at the measles and all this and all that? Oh my God, what happens? What happens? You know, what happens at the chicken pox, at the shingles? What do you got to do? It's like, guys, what are you doing every day right now for COVID? Oh yeah, use that. You know, use that. You're worried about the measles and all this other stuff, but you're practicing it now with COVID. So bring in that daily experience, and that counts because that's what you're doing every day. And I'm going to tell you something. The people that are doing the interviews, you know, you could get people that are bullet for bullet, you know, and I get it. But having said that, there are some people that, okay, I'm not going to hit every bullet, but I'm going to let you know that I do understand what the process is. And let me tell you something. Sometimes you'll be shocked because some of the things that they say, they should have been a bullet. You just didn't put it there. Sometimes we limit ourselves because maybe, you know, if people are just going to memorize policy, then I'm looking for these specific bullets. But what about if it's more than that? You know, we're not giving that person a chance to kind of give you some details and how to maneuver. And I really do believe that, you know, the people that are doing the interviews, you can't limit yourself to the bullets of policy. If the person's not, like as I mentioned, the person from the rehabilitation side, I may not have access to that. So at that point, the person from the custody side has an unfair advantage on me. But with that said, let me show you my potential now. So that's what goes into the next part. If there's questions that you don't know, and I know Russ has a thought on this, so I'll go first on this one, if you don't mind, Russ, is when you don't know something, this is a good chance for you not to get nervous, but to show how resourceful you are. So if they ask you a question that you don't know, for whatever reason, because it happens, this is your chance to show how resourceful you are, show your potential, and show how you can get that answer. So as I mentioned, the rehabilitative side, not knowing this escape policy. Okay, fine, but let me show you, you know, what happened when I went through it from the civilian perspective. Or, hey, you know what? I'm not really too familiar with that question, but here's the route I would take. I would go to this person, or this person. So I think for me, I'm okay with not knowing something because it gives me a chance to show you my resources. And 9 times out of 10, guys, and if you're listening to me on this and you're one of the people that are doing the interviews, let me tell you something. Life in corrections is barely ever dry policy where we wish things would work A, B, C, D, E. It doesn't. It's gray. So to be honest with you, anybody can memorize policy. But when you have someone that can show me they're resourceful, so they may not know something, they may not know an answer at first, but they're problem solving right in front of you to try to figure out how to solve it. Being resourceful for me is probably one of the best gifts that you can have coming into profession, and one of the gifts that are overlooked. Russ, what's your thoughts on not knowing an answer? Can you still be confident in not knowing something?
Yeah, because your choices right then are starting to limit themselves. So what do? If you fake it, they're going to sniff you out. I'll tell you what, man, there is nobody smarter or faster than those people that are in corrections at figuring out whether you're full of bullshit or not. So you better have a good way to answer a question about something that you don't know about. You can tell them, well, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that list of procedures is contained in chapter 55,000, which is the confidential section. So that's where I would start with. But I also know who else to call. And I also know some other people that are pretty knowledgeable that work around me that I know where to get the answer from. And you can rest assured that before I take any position you offer me, that I'll know what the answer to this is before I get to sleep tonight, because I'm going to make sure that I look that up, because that's the kind of drive that I have to make sure that I'm the best possible choice for this position.
And you know what's funny is when you get promoted, the first thing I look for are my people, because I need resources. That's the first thing I look for. Is I'm looking to see who my people are, because I know I'm going to need them. So again, you can learn all these policies, but if you don't know the people that can help you facilitate them, so being resourceful and letting them see that on the interview. So again, it's a good way to express it when you don't know something. But you're problem solving every day. So if you have a chance to advertise and show you're resourceful, it's very important. It really is. Now, guys, I also want to mention that each question they ask you, you have to make it your own. So, and what I mean by that is there's always a way that you could bring a question from them into your world. This way, when you express it from your perspective. A lot of people, what happens here is they get so concerned coming on this interview because, well, anything could be asked of me. I don't know what they can toss my way. It doesn't matter what they toss your way, especially on the second part of the interview when you're interviewing for a supervisor. Because I even tell people when they're interviewing for just an introductory position, it doesn't matter, because somewhere along the line, whatever they ask you, you can always find a way to apply it to your world. Even if it's not exactly what they want, you're giving them an answer. Like a lot of the questions they may even ask you as a supervisor could deal with employee conflicts, employee morale. That's a big thing. Now, when you're in an introductory position, they'll be like, what would you do if an inmate gave you a concern, or I don't know, an inmate was disgruntled or whatever it is? And it's like, well, I never worked with inmates before, but it says here you worked in customer service. Have you ever dealt with a disgruntled employee? Yeah. Well, what did you do? Sometimes we get so caught up in this correctional world that we forget that we may have some good experiences that we could share that could be applied to the correctional world. So believe it or not, I know there's some dangers involved. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's 100% match, but if I'm new and I'm entering this profession and I haven't dealt with a disgruntled inmate, but I worked in a sales floor, I've dealt with a disgruntled whatever it is, a disgruntled customer. Well, I'm going to use that and make that question my own. Now, that's again just to kind of get my thought out. But even as a supervisor, they're going to say, well, what would you do if, let's say, you have two employees that aren't getting along, and you oversee them? What would you do? How would you solve that matter? Guys, these are questions that really a lot of people will be like, they try to give the generic answers. They try to say, well, you know what? I'm going to try to, I'm going to try to see what their concerns are. I'm going to try to, look, guys, most of the time, to be honest with you, I know this may sound crazy. How I answer that is, I'm going to make an effort to de-escalate. I always will do that. But at the end, I'm also going to hold them responsible. If their work starts to fall back, I don't have time for personal beef inside this workplace. As you start to move up, you can realize that other people's concerns can destroy an agency, can destroy an organization. So in the end, I'm not going to coddle them either. A lot of people go, right, and I'm going to de-escalate, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to try to be so friendly. No, at one point, guys, you can make the effort, hey, what's going on? But at one point, you got to hold them responsible. So people don't usually give that answer. They give the lighter side of things. No, in the end, guys, if I have two people that aren't getting along, I'm going to talk to them individually, and I'm going to say, hey, listen, whatever this personal stuff is, it's got to stop, because at the end, you're bringing down the team. So if the team starts picking up for the slack, I'm going to start holding each one of you responsible. And people are like, you're going to say that? Yes, because I work in the real world, and that's what you have to do. What's your thoughts on those type of questions with the conflicts between employees? I know I kind of got a little aggressive, Russ, but Russ, you've been a supervisor, Russ, when two employees don't get along and you're a supervisor, you want to coddle it and try to, that's how you get in trouble.
Yeah, there are those things, where you have to take immediate action, and it has to be forceful action that gets immediate results and that resolves the situation, because there's a lot of things that happen in corrections where we just simply can't tolerate those external forces like that to be part of a bunch of new set of problems when life and death is on the line every day in every facility across the United States. So, I would want, if I was, ever an administrator, someone that takes that kind of decisive, forceful action to resolve things, so that we're not sitting there stewing and miring in all of these, personal petty conflicts that do happen believe me, at every institution. But we have to find a way to mitigate them, get rid of them, and get moving on with the rest of the correctional day.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, Russ, because it's so true. And guys, these are people with experience coming in, because I deal with it too a lot. Employees conflicts, Russ has. You don't got time for it, not in our world. So in the end, it's like, oh, what's going on? How can I help? How can I resolve? Maybe 2 seconds of that effort. Most of the time, it's really going in and letting them know this ain't the place for it. And I'm going to still be a professional, but I'm going to tell you what's going on. Your attitude towards each other is affecting your work, and that now is affecting the team. So in the end, if you guys don't straighten up, I got to do what's best for the team. And the other thing is they're going to talk about employee morale. For me, as a supervisor, bringing value, letting people know of their purpose, being a voice for them. Hopefully they appreciate the effort. We don't always get the outcome we want. But you got to be a translator. You're translating the concerns from above, from below. But employee morale is a very big thing. And I think the best way that you can help with employee morale is to just, you yourself have to be on point. You yourself have to feel good about what you do. You yourself, sucks to say, if you have a bad moment, we're all allowed to have a bad moment. I'm not saying that, but you got to get yourself out of it. Again, take yourself some time. If you need a day off, whatever it is, I'm not saying to ignore it. I'm saying, but you as a supervisor have to find your way out of it. You can't allow yourself to be in it that long, because if you do, that's going to translate. And we all have bad moments. So mind you, I didn't say you're not allowed to have it as a supervisor, because we have more than many. But the point is, you can't stay in it. So I'm not even telling you hide it and have a smile and go to work. No, I'm telling you, give yourself a day and then go back to work and do what you can to lift people up, because you as a supervisor, they're going to follow you. You're that example, and you can't tell people to be happy and stuff if you yourself are disgruntled. And in the end, what I would do as a supervisor right now to lift morale is to try to teach my front line to appreciate the effort and not the outcome. That's a big thing that we're getting across now, because in the end, we don't always get the outcome we want. And then what happens is we start disenfranchising the people that provide the effort. And I think the front line sometimes doesn't kick back that appreciation for the effort. So I think that's something that we need to do, because the effort truly does matter more than the outcome. So, and I think the effort also brings value. So again, another thing is also to let the people that you're supervising, let them know that they're appreciated. Recognize and appreciation is different. Appreciation is about the individual. Recognition is about something they do. You want to appreciate the individual. So, let them know that they're appreciated. Even a thank you for the routine stuff that they do. Why not? Oh, but Ganji, I'm supposed to do tours every day. I don't care. Thank you for it. Thank you for what you do. I don't care if it's routine or not. I want you to know I appreciate what you're doing, every day. Don't minimize the fact that you do something every day that it doesn't count. It's because you do something every day that it counts. So, Russ, I think they'll ask questions about employee morale. I mean, what would be your best way to answer that, especially in today's times?
Well, the thing that has the most impact on employee morale really happens to be not just the way they're treated, but the way they're led, right? If you're going to be that leader that's going to, take the time to make sure that they're trained well, if you're going to be that guy or gal that's going to make sure that they're treated well, if you're going to be that guy or gal that's going to make sure that they have the things that they need to carry out their duties, all of that is going to naturally lift the morale of your people up. And that's really where you have to be with that. You can try and do a bunch of external things as far as, being friendly and things like that. But it's really how helpful you can be with them carrying out their duties that's going to matter most of all.
Yeah, and guys, I also think as we come to a close right now, Russ said the keyword leader. Maybe even before you go to that interview, maybe pick up a John Maxwell book. 360 Leaders, a very good book to pick up. Or I love the 8 Paradoxes of Leadership, because these are questions. I mean, these are books that can help you see things on a very deep level that you don't realize until you actually really read it and understand it, how much it applies to this profession. I mean, that's the key. I read all these books every day and try to find the ways to apply it, and I feel it makes me better. So when they're asking questions, it's great where you can just hit a home run, and it turns out that not only you're answering the question for them, you're taking them to school. I mean, I had someone tell me that when I was on one of the interviews. He's like, Angie, I should have took notes because I'm learning. And I was like, wow. And at the time I didn't get the position, but it was a good moment. It was a good moment. I mean, I got what I wanted now, but the key is that I think that gives you a good chance to kind of cross into knowledge that they may not be aware of. And Russ, you're going to agree with this, Russ, and I know you're going to want to run with this real quick. A lot of people wait for to get the position to kind of start looking into leadership stuff. If you notice, a lot of the leadership conferences are usually only given to executive staff, which I think is foolish. You should give it to anybody, because leaders are really just people that are empowered, that want to make decisions, take responsibility, service others. That doesn't matter your position. That matters who you are. So don't wait for the right position to pick up a leadership book. Become a leader now. Read the books now and better yourself. So when you go out for those interviews, you blow their minds. Because I'm going to tell you something. When you want to sell yourself on an interview, it's not so much the technical questions that most people focus on to sell themselves. It's the subjective ones. The subjective ones are your chance to shine above everyone else. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, a couple things. Yeah, you're trying to present yourself in this interview as either, for instance, sergeant material, or are you leadership material, right? Sergeant material can just be whether or not you check all the boxes. Leadership is about whether or not, you can get people to follow you and move forward and attack each and every correctional day as it comes. And the last thing that I'd really like to address that happens inside all of these interviews is at the end, they're usually going to give you a chance to say something, a chance to put your particular, special little bit of influence in there, right? It's a chance to sell yourself. And in that, you've got to give them a hook and a reason for them to pull you up and put you into that position. And so, this is your chance to tell them, number one, how you have prepared yourself. Number two, what your vision is for the position that you're going to be taking on. And then number three, to show them what your mindset is with regards to taking on all these things. And by that, this is what I said, essentially, at the end of my interview. I said, I've talked to you about how I've prepared. I've talked to you about what my vision is for all of this. I said, and you know what? I think I know what to do in most situations, and I feel comfortable and confident in it. But in every situation that I take on, I'm going to be sure that I approach my supervisor and make sure not only did I do it right, but what else I could have done in order to grow myself further and become the leader that I want to be. And it's saying things like that and showing them your sincerity that's going to be the hook for you to get that position.
Yeah, I love that, guys. It's about clarification. You want to answer concise, brief, right to the point, and you want to be confident. I don't care if there's dead air. If you said what you had to say, you said what you had to say. And remember, guys, you walk in with confidence, you leave with confidence, you give your best. And remember, just as much as you want the position, they also need the position. Hey, Russ, if you have a second, I don't know if you do, I have mock interview questions. I have a few. I wanted to put you on a mock interview, see how you answer them.
Well, this is excellent. And just so everyone knows, this was completely unexpected and completely a surprise to me. So let's do it.
All right, Russ, I'm interviewing you right now. So remember, guys, take even just the tempo, the tonality, the way Russ is going to answer this. Quick, brief, to the point. This is what's expected, but key is confident. Because sometimes when they ask a question, you answer it. They don't answer it. They don't say anything back. They don't go right to the next question. All of a sudden, they go, "Did we say enough? Did we say enough?" Probably did. Just stop now, because now you're starting to dig yourself and you're starting to lose confidence. Okay, Russ, tell me something about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Russ Hamilton, but you already knew that because you have that paper in front of you. And I have essentially 30 years of experience. I have 17 years of experience as a correctional officer. I have another 8 years experience as a correctional sergeant. And I have another 5 years experience in both juvenile correction facilities and rehab and rehabilitation.
Okay. What do you want to achieve as a supervisor?
Well, as a supervisor, I think that my real calling is to impact safety and security. That's where I've focused most of my energy, most of the development of my skills over my career. And I think that I'm the kind of person that can pass those traits on to staff as I lead them, to be able to train them, to be able to develop them, to be able to have them see what I see with regards to a whole host of potential security breaches and impacts. Things like the STGs, the gangs, things about, finding weapons and contraband, things about discovering potential security breaches. I also teach classes on complacency, and I teach classes on critical thinking. And I think that I can use those to bring these people that I'm going to be supervising to the higher level, and be able to make this facility, and specifically the unit I'll be working in, safer and more secure.
What are some of the steps you would take in dealing with the problematic employee?
I think the first thing that you really have to do is you have to just approach them on that personal level. And you have to, initially just make things as loose and informal as possible, because, people have a lot of different tensions and stressors in their lives, and being approached in a formal setting, in a formal way, can put them on guard. This might be something that can really be taken care of simply, effectively, with just some talk. So I would first approach them and see, what their issues are, and point out what their behavior has been that's been, looked on in a negative light. And then I would tell them what I thought that they could do to get beyond that, and to move in a direction where they can get that negative behavior behind them. From there, of course, it may not be that simple. It may be something, more embedded in their personality. It may be that they're simply that sort of resistant individual that's never going to take constructive criticism well, if at all. And then there will be a point, perhaps beyond that, where we might have to have a more formal talk, where we might have to have a more formal issuance of paperwork. And it might be something where I might have to forward it up the chain, and I might have to contact my supervisors in order to get a better idea of where we proceed from there.
A few more, almost done. This is a good question, Russ. Question I've never asked you before. I'm very curious to see how you would answer. This is a good question. Share an experience in which your diligence of inspecting equipment, structure, or materials helped you identify a problem or the cause of a problem.
I think that there's probably some specific events that I could point to. What I'd really rather, point to with regards to this, though, is after I came back from being a sergeant at one point, where I became a retired annuitant, and I busted back down to officer, I went on about a 2.5-year, what I like to call just a crusade on making my little area of the facility safer. And during those 2 to 2.5 years, I ended up discovering and finding at least 55 different inmate manufactured weapons. And it was that, that inspection of my area. It was that attention to detail. It was being able to take those skills that I've developed during my past and showing them to other correctional staff, who then went on to be able to find more and more weapons, discover more cell phones, more drugs, learning how to validate gang members, that made that entire little section of that prison, I think, a whole lot safer. And that was something I didn't have to do. That was something that I decided I was going to, put on this clinic about how to search for the 2 to 2.5 years that I was there. And I think that just goes to, showcase the type of work ethic that I have and the type of dedication that I have to that safety and security feature that I mentioned before.
All right, down to 2 more questions, last 2. What have you found to be the best way to monitor the performance of your work and the work of others? Share a time when you had to take corrective action.
Especially with regard to myself, to just try and, make sure that progress is made in the unit I'm in the facility that I'm in from day to day, and that I'm not becoming complacent, that I'm not just becoming familiar with the routine in a way that takes me off my edge. I think for me, it's that constant checking myself. It's that constant introspection and trying to make sure that I'm not simply letting things slide, letting things go, becoming too comfortable with certain inmates who might be my workers, who might be my clerks. I've had experience in that before, where it was just really necessary to make sure that I was watching that detail. And I think that that's the one thing where perhaps over the years that, I kind of shined, in that day in and day out, I was a productive officer. I was always either finding things, putting down incidents, stopping incidents, or finding things out before they even had a chance to get started. I brokered some peace treaties at one point on our yard between North and South, where we had been locked down for 6 months solid. I was successful at that. And I think just overall, that attention to detail is what I became known for and what I'm able to present and offer to you today.
All right, last question, sir. Provide a time when you dealt calmly and effectively with a high-stress situation.
There's literally hundreds that I think I could point to. I do remember, one particular scenario, though, that it was more recent. It wasn't necessarily in a correctional setting, but it was with a probationer. And I had no tools or equipment at my disposal, but he was clearly in the throes of methamphetamine psychosis. And so I knew at that point that I was the only one there really capable of dealing with him. No one else in the room, and there was like 5 or 6 others, had the experience with actually talking someone down like that. At one point, he accused me of infecting him with COVID. And it was getting to the point where it was, a little bit scary, I think, more for the rest of them, even though a friend of mine who was a probation officer, we knew him to be on the way to get ready to remove this guy. And I was just able to get everyone to a place of safety and to continue talking to the guy and to get him to the point where he was just sinking down further and further to the ground. And it was absolutely unnecessary at that point to have to resort to any force. And I was lauded later by my boss for that, because she'd never really dealt in a correctional setting like that before. And she was just happy that I was able to take that situation, de-escalate it, and, get that guy removed.
Perfect. Now, usually at the end of the interview, I would do what Russ said. I would ask a question back, maybe something like, what do you expect from a correctional supervisor? Let them know that, you're willing to listen to what their expectations are. And plus, by the way, if you're a supervisor and you're becoming a supervisor, you already should be aware of the people in front of you. So know your audience too. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to kind of cater to the audience in front of you if you know them. I've used that obviously to just give respect back. Sometimes people in higher ups, they want to be appreciated too. So, sometimes it's great to say, hey, let's say Russ is on the panel. I've been blessed to work with a good team. Russ, he's my major, and under his expertise, these are the things I've been able to learn. So you see what I did there? As long as you're not dishonest, I think that works. Russ, your interview went well. I will not be calling you back if you don't get it. We don't call people back. So if you don't get nothing within the next 8 or 9 years, there's a good chance that you probably weren't picked, but maybe wait a little longer. I will be honest with you. The guy we interviewed from Walmart with no correctional experience, we want him, So,
if he gets the nod, he gets the nod,
Hey, Russ, you have anything you want to say? What we should do one day, honestly, Russ? We should actually do a mock interview thing, have those 10 questions, and then the audience could select who they would hire.
Oh, absolutely, man.
We could bring Will Young, yourself, Soto, and then what we could do is we could ask, I could record them all separately, and then we could just put it all together and just ask them, okay, who would you pick? Who's the best employee? And this way you guys don't know how each other answered those questions.
Yeah, maybe we could put it in a poll or something.
Yeah, maybe you guys could. We should do that, guys. You know what? Maybe in the near future, we'll do mock interviews. I'll even go on the other end, and we'll ask a series of questions to see how we answer them. Obviously, hopefully we have some knowledge. Hey, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Just everyone out there, stay safe. Got Christmas coming up and all that. Be careful out there. The inmate manufactured booze is going to be flowing. And that is always a recipe for both disaster and staff assaults, unfortunately. So don't get complacent. Don't let complacency bite you in the ass, people.
Yeah, and so just in case, I don't want YouTube and Facebook banning my videos. Russ meant happy holidays.
Happy holidays, yes.
All right, hey guys, this was a good topic. I think, again, we tried to do stuff generalized, but I think we did cover a lot just in regards to some techniques. And I think even in Russ's mock interview, there's a lot of nuggets there that could even be its own show in itself. So this is definitely a very bonus-filled episode. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.